So welcome to another welcome to another episode of Co-founders. This is Alex Mont-ros, and we have
Lisa
my
Mont-ros.
beautiful wife, Lisa Mont-ros. Alrighty. So, you know what? I do a lot of talking, and I'm tired of it. So I need you to do damn talking this time.
It's okay. Actually, that's not how this is going to work at all.
I'm still going to do all the talking?
You're still going to do all the talking.
Yeah.
I'm just going to lead.
Fair enough. All right. So what are we talking about today?
Well,
lead us in.
One of our previous episodes, we talked about, employee versus entrepreneur and how being an entrepreneur is somewhat romanticized. So I entered a whole new world when I met you because I came from a W-2 world. You work for somebody, you retire, you put money in your 401k, you do all that stuff, right? And then I met you, and I swear every week was something new, like, hey babe, I got this idea. We're going to do this. And at one point, I think we had a toaster completely taken apart in the kitchen because So
can I share what that idea was? Okay, so we took a toaster apart.
You did it. Like, let's not wrap me into that one.
I actually consulted with
who?
George, because George was electrical engineer. I said, George, is this possible?
Okay.
So, in essence, this is a cool idea. I still have it on there. Okay. So, because I've been to other countries, okay, where you pump water from a well, okay, and the water from a well can only get heated up through fire in a boiling pot a lot of times, right? So the thought was, can you create a somewhat of like adjustable kind of plug-on to wherever that well is, that would, through the pressure of the water, heat up coils, and at least at a minimum, maybe not hot water, but get it to become warm. Same thing at a house. So when I went to Haiti, it was cold showers. So you imagine if you had an adapter where you just placed it in the water. I mean, it's still pressured water coming out of a pipe, but it's not warm. So you put this adapter on, and through the pressure of the water, it's, somewhat of what was the
conductor, heat.
Yeah, I forgot the technical term.
It has kinetic energy, right? Because you have the force of the water streaming through.
Exactly.
And so you use that.
There you go. Yeah, use the energy from the water then. So I was going back and forth with George, and we were actually coming up with the coils. I was like, okay, I'm gonna take a toaster apart. I'm gonna see what the coils are. How can I leverage these coils and try to put a prototype together?
Right.
So, anyhow,
so my point was, that was one of many.
Yeah.
Hey babes, and I always knew when the "Hey babe" came out, I was like, oh shit. I don't know what crazy idea is coming, but I support it, and I supported all of them.
That one's still on the deck.
Right. Okay.
That one's in the. Because that one's
but I like our toaster. Don't take our toaster apart, because I actually really like our toaster.
I know. I have to buy a few dozen.
Find a different conductor, whatever you have to do.
Whatever I have to do.
So, but you, I honestly believe, are a serial entrepreneur. Like, I think it's a disease you might have of some sort, if you can classify it as that. I mean, and at one point there was a food truck or Cuban restaurant was on the radar, which was probably one of my favorite ideas because we just got to eat yummy Cuban food all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I think every weekend there was a pork roasting in the oven, and so we could make Cuban sandwiches, and our friends also loved that idea. And then Moncord came to be, and we no longer cook pork. I know. I should get back to that. It was
it's
yummy.
Just not good for me.
But I was sort of like, having met you, thrust into a whole new world because I never once even thought about going into business for myself. Like, I always just assumed I'd climb my way up somebody else's ladder, right? Like, they had built it and you'd only get so high. So when do you think you realized you were, and that's not true actually. I mean, I think I just like to make money, but I don't think I ever thought about starting a company, because I did sell like crazy things to my neighbors that they bought. I don't know why. But anyway, when do you think you realized you were an entrepreneur?
It's a good question. I don't know if I...
people say that's a good question when they're really trying to think of what the answer is.
Well, that's what I'm trying to think right now.
I didn't prep you for this at all.
No, you didn't. This is all on the fly. So I don't think there was ever a moment. There's not a moment. What I do recall, so growing up, so between the ages of like 5 and 7, my dad and my mom owned a retail business. All right, and they sold dancewear to local in Vegas to local studios, girls that needed like ballerina wear and all this type of stuff for dance, right? So they had a retail brick and mortar store, and so my dad and my mom had that store, and I remember going into the shop as a kid, and it was their own little thing. And so, but when my mom passed, I was about 7 years old. My dad went nuts. I think you know that story. Well, my dad is still nuts, but but he literally lost his mind. And throughout the course of that about 10 years into that, there was a lot of interesting ways to make money that I got to witness.
I mean, we don't have to go into details.
No, we're not going to go into details. And I partook in some of those ways as a kid and in my teenage years too. So, but interestingly, I had my first job at 15 and a half. I was a photographer for JCPenney, which is funny to me. I was taking family photos and trying to make little babies laugh, and it was funny. And then I went and got a job at Panda. So I'd go, there was this one instance where I was working, took a family photo. They went to the mall. I got off work, I had to run over because it was in the food court, get my Panda, and here I am, orange chicken, and they were like, "Did you just take our Panda?" They were so confused. I remember that was so funny. So I'd always had a work ethic because it was nice, and I think within the next year from that, I left both, and then I started doing like telemarketing. And that, unfortunately, I think that was a racket. I didn't know any better. I was like 16, 17. And what I remember is, for every person you got to sign up for a credit card was, you got paid X amount commission. So at 16 years old, every week you're making $400 a week. That's a lot of money for a 16-year-old in the 90s, 96, right? 96, 97. So, I mean, the money, it was like, oh man, so sales became a thing that, because if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to be a salesperson. Mm-hmm. You're always selling. You can't be an entrepreneur and not be a salesperson. That's my opinion, because how is anybody going to know about what the hell you do? You can be the back end and have somebody sell it for you, but you have to have that attribute. So I think over the course of those years, and then in 23, in between all that, there was other things I was doing, but 22, 23, I got into real estate. And so it was always, I enjoyed that as an entrepreneur, your ceiling for making money is unlimited. And at a job, you're limited. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it's a curse for me because money drives a lot of the behavior because I came from nothing, right? It was poor and all that growing especially after my mom passed. So through that, if I had to go make $1 as a kid, while I was a latchkey kid, I'd go and either steal something or have to go and, hey, I'll go pull some of these weeds. And I'm like 8 years old pulling weeds for a few bucks. So I can go to 7-Eleven and grab something to eat. So that was a lot of so I look back, all that stuff was, I don't know, preparation, I guess, for being a madman.
But I think it's one of those things where there's a difference between an entrepreneur and a non-entrepreneur. I guess I'd call them those two things with regards to money. And you and I just met with our financial advisor a couple weeks ago, and she said something, and both of us were like, "Yeah, but it's just money. If we need to make $100,000, we'll go make $100,000." Yeah. And that's genuinely how I think about money. It's not this. And there's times I get terrified because of money, but it's also, I know that if I had to, I'd take my lawnmower and I'd walk up and down the street and I'd mow people's lawns so that we could buy dinner. I did it as a kid. You did it as a kid. Mm-hmm. There's just a different mindset around money where it's always there. You just have to figure out how to get it in your hands and not in somebody else's, legally, without stealing.
Legally. Yes, legally.
Legally. There's no stealing involved. Do you think if your life hadn't, and it really, I think a big turning point for your life was when your mom passed away. Do you think had she not, you would have gone down that same path? Because a lot of those entrepreneur traits came out of necessity.
Yeah, I do, because you know, seeing my mom was probably in the very similar position that you were in with me.
I know your father, and
With
I
my
would
dad.
say that's probably true.
So back then, you know, had that business flourished, because I think the business went down after she had cancer. So then, you know, they had to shut it down, of course, right, to focus on trying to get her help. But had they continued, who knows, right? Maybe that little store turns into 2 to 3. Maybe at 15, 16, I start running one of the stores. You know what I mean? Who knows what that turns into, right? But I think that path would have already been set, you know, where, yeah, I think it had already been set. And I, you know, and the interesting part too, like even and I learned this young, which now I realize it's been a huge advantage from a habit perspective, was I always had 2 or 3 jobs. Always. There'd be times where I'd go to work, and my brother at one point was working at some, like, at one point I freaking did stage prop for Britney Spears' concert.
How do I not know this?
Yeah.
I'm like the world's biggest Britney fan, and I don't even. How do I not know this about you?
Because it was late at, like, so I went from one job
I know, but how
to
have
another,
I
and it
known
was like
you
a graveyard shift.
Huh.
Yeah.
Huh.
At the MGM. So here I am just trying to make $1 at anywhere I could, right? And, you know, back then, you know,
We could have met, because I'm sure I saw her at the MGM.
I know.
When you did that.
It was funny, like these cars made out of cardboard, and
Yeah, I
was,
saw that show.
yeah.
I saw that. I was like front row.
Yeah, it was cool. It was cool. Did that, but anyhow, the point is, like, you look back then, gosh, like having the tools now at that same age, with the access to the internet and things the way they are now, it'd been a different world. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you know, you and I always joke about how money, it's easy to make money if you really, it's everywhere. You just gotta, and especially nowadays so yeah, I think nevertheless, I always had those 2 or 3 jobs going. So when I transitioned to being an adult, I already had a habit of working all the time anyway. So I didn't get tired of working. He was always trying to find a way to, and because you're raised in Vegas is a very materialistic type of place, right? Mm-hmm. So you're driven by that. It's not, that's the bad part about what people don't talk about Vegas. Vegas is, I have a love-hate relationship with Las Vegas. I love it because it's where I'm from. But at the same time, it instills things in you that aren't healthy over the course of life, right? Especially when you have family, and the drive for money and the drive for status is just not a healthy thing to chase, when the significance is what you should be chasing, right? Over the course of a life. So, but Vegas instills that into a lot of kids, instilled it into us. And if I look at the time frame of when I was, you know, in my teens, it was like the hip hop era. You had Pac, you had Biggie, you had Jay-Z, you had all these people that are coming out of something saying, hey, you can, right? So it's whether it's you're selling drugs or you're doing whatever, making money, it's always in front of you in Vegas. So that instilled something as well, you know, and yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of what I hear from you is what you and I have talked about, and I obviously know your story. I did not know about Britney.
I've told you that before, but you forgot about that.
I don't know if I would forget, but okay.
Yeah, you did.
But I think a lot of what you and I have talked about is a lot of times it's adversity that creates success and drive and creates those good habits. And I know that's definitely true for your life. Is, you know, I mean, when the path is laid out for you, you don't have to work for anything. So you never really learn that. And I fear that for our kids in one sense, because I think you and I have given our kids a lot of what we think we didn't have growing up, and they haven't had to fight for a lot. And I think that fighting is something, I mean, it creates you. Yeah. And gives you those habits and stuff.
Yeah, because, you know, I remember being a kid. Well, and you had to fight through a lot of the negativity, because being raised in Vegas, I lived on a street where I was like, you know, it was probably one of the only brown kids right, on the block. Maybe there was like one other black kid, and everybody was white kids. So you had to learn. I mean, everything from racism to fighting because of that, right? Being called names, like you learn through adversity. Like I had to learn that from, early on. And I remember even then having parents of my friends tell me like, oh, you'll probably get some girl pregnant at 14. Literally say that to me.
Wow. Like,
because that was what they thought my life was, because I was this ragged kid that, they were like, we have our Johnny over here that's, goody two-shoe. What they didn't know was Johnny wasn't a goody two-shoe. He was a effing jerk. And, he was the one bullying everybody and whatever. But Johnny was the little, the kid that everybody looked up to. And interestingly enough, unfortunately, a lot of those kids, to your point, I look now, I see where they're at. They're not doing anything. Either they got hooked on drugs or, they're, some of them right now are on drugs, or one of them died. The other one, they're doing okay, but never what they're, if you were to ask them, is this where you thought your life was going to be? They'd be like, no.
Yeah. Well, because I think they get a lot of.
And I'm just the brown kid, the beaner that came out of Vegas that made something of himself, Yeah. Well, at least that's what they used to call me.
I don't call you that.
Or wetback.
And I never hear anybody call you that.
Yeah, so. Well, now, because now it's not. It'd be a different story if somebody called me that.
Yeah.
Maybe behind closed doors. Go ahead.
Maybe. Well, I think it leads us into our optimizer segment. So what would you say? Like,
you optimize it.
You're the optimizer.
No, you are. Optimize it. You're right there.
I'll arm wrestle you for it. This is Alex's tips and tricks and whatever it is for optimizing. I would say the one thing that I've learned from you, and I think has rung true for people that you look at over the course of a lifetime, is don't shy away from adversity and don't shy away from the negative stuff, because it really is what shapes you and it's what creates your success. Bill Gates was in a garage building computers, or in the computer lab at University of Washington in the middle of the night. So it's the things that actually sometimes seem like negatives and things that are going to hold you back that actually propel you forward if you fight through it.
Awesome.
Optimize. I don't do those. Those are your thing. No,
it's good. I'd add, it's...
I knew you would add.
No, I'm not adding. No, I'm not. I think that covers it, but people go two routes in life. They either become the victim, or they decide that they can overcome. And I thank God that I've always had, I don't know, I always say like I've had a hand of God on me or something in my life, because there were so many times where I could have went into a gang, or I could have been hooked on drugs, because it was all around me. That was what I was raised around, or dead. There was instances and situations where it wasn't going to go well that night, and thankfully we didn't get caught into a situation where I could have been dead along with some of my other friends, right? So all those things, I look back, I'm like, oh my goodness, like how did I dodge all these bullets in life? Having that in mind, and being grateful and having a consistent awareness of, like, you really have the control. You have the ability to overcome. You have the ability to not accept what your past was or predefined for you, or was supposed to be predefined as the truth for your life. That doesn't have to be the case. And I think that's helped me overcome a lot, because it's easy. It would have been very easy to quit. Yeah, to quit, and in the sense of just quitting, like, this is my life.
Yeah.
And
you see that a lot.
You do see that a lot. Yeah, people just give up, and they're like, this is what it is. Unfortunately, I know people close to me that are in similar situations of my family, and I try to talk to them, other generations coming up, and I see a lot of, I wish somebody would have told me some of the stuff I'm telling them so that they can see the world differently, but they don't see it, and maybe they'll take, who knows what life will take them, what course it will take them, but I think another powerful thing, just to kind of wrap this up, is if you've come from that place, you need to be able to, you have something to share. And you need to let people know that maybe have not come from a place of where there's despair or they don't believe they can, that you can potentially be the one that literally speaks life into them and makes them think different about the possibilities. Because there's been multiple people in my life after the course of being a, teenager and all that spoke into my life and made me believe too, and those words are powerful when they come from somebody that says like, no, you can, I've seen it, you can. And you're like, oh, I can. Mm-hmm. Those little words of encouragement, you never know how impactful they'll be for somebody 10, 20 years down the road. So if you've come from that place, you need to realize there's power in that, and you need to be able to, you got to share that because it's there to be shared.
And not hide it. I think people try to hide
there's nothing to hide.
The yuckiness of their past or the muddiness. It's who made you.
Yeah, it was a whole nother story of, I can go for like 2 hours around all sorts of crazy stuff. We should have my dad on, have him tell some stories. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing.
Am I your guest?
You were my guest. You were my guest today, so thank you.
Yeah.
I haven't done any one-on-ones.
All right.
So that's my one-on-one.
Cool.
And thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next time on Co-Founders.